Hey everybody, I'm Barry Rosen with Applied Vedic Astrology. Welcome to today's kind of introduction to our financial astrology course for the fall. It's actually our first lesson. What I do, I like to give a free preview of what we're going to do in the class. At the same time, I like to give knowledge out for people who aren't taking the class. So that's what we're going to do today. Today's topic is personal income and finding income in your chart, but we're going to do a lot of other things also. Let me tell you a little bit about myself for those of you who don't know me. First, I'm going to do a sound check. Affy, how's the sound?
Sound is good. Good morning, Barry.
Great. Okay. What I usually do in these previews is I usually I lecture more than I usually do in most classes, and so I will pause and take questions at key points of the lecture, and I'll unmute you. If I leave you unmuted, sometimes inevitably somebody doesn't notice they're unmuted and their vacuum cleaner is going in the background because their wife is vacuuming or something like that, and it bleeds onto the tape. So we'll keep you muted, but you can answer. You will have time to ask questions. Let me tell me a little bit about myself. I've been involved. Actually, I specialize in financial astrology and investment astrology. I began my studies with it in 1987, and I was very curious about how the markets kind of worked. I was wondering why gold was up one day and stocks were down another day and things like that. And so I spent a lot of time researching this topic and actually became one of the top people in the world in investment astrology and predicting markets. And I made a good living out of that for many years, and I still have that business. About 6 or 7 years ago, I started, I was feeling a little bit tired working with gamblers because I was attracting a lot of gamblers to the investment industry because people like to take risks and make money and things like that. And so I started moving my practice more towards spiritual astrology, and most of you know me for my columns and readings and things like that. But given the situation in the world with world finances and people on the edge with finances, I thought it was important to go back to financial astrology and teach this class. And I'm actually developed some new products in my business. I still have a newsletter that I've had for almost since 1980. I started in 1988, predicting the financial markets, gold and the stock market and silver and crude oil and grains. A lot of it is technical analysis. A lot of it is also astrology. The astrology kind of helps filter out. So I actually, and then I have done a lot of work in mundane astrology, predicting countries and presidents and stuff like that. And a lot, like I said, over the last 3 or 4 years, I kind of got, I wouldn't say bored of doing that, but it was kind of like, what, I'm not sure what it means. Like, I mean, what does it matter if you predict who's going to win the presidency? It's kind of a happening, and it's not about ego, like, oh, I'm the only person that predicted the presidency. I mean, it's just not, I didn't see any value in it. So I've been moving more to trying to help people. And this is part 2 of a class that I've taught for 3 years. Part 1 is available for $197 on videotape to watch at your own leisure, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Part 2 is expanding into some areas that I didn't really cover in part 1, and some new material and research that I've done. I've been practicing Vedic astrology since 1987, 1988. And again, I've had a financial business for many years. I've specialized in business astrology. It's like I said, it's a funny thing when you hit your Saturn return, which happened, it happens at age 60, you start rethinking what you want to do with life. So I had this financial business for about 30 years, and I started teaching Vedic astrology on the weekends, and I do readings. Probably about 60% of my time now is working on teaching classes and doing consulting for people, but I still have my financial business because I still have a lot of clients from that. So that's a little bit of background on me. What I usually do in my classes is I start, let me give you my contact information. I usually start classes with some Vedic chanting, and here's my contact information, Barry2 at appliedvedicastrology.com. My website, appliedvedicastrology.com, and I've got all the Facebook sites. Now, I usually start classes with some Vedic chanting because as you know, Vedic astrology really goes back to the priests and the villages who were like the local doctors, and they would prescribe mantras to help people with their problems, and it was all about remedies, really. And so the essence of Vedic astrology really goes back to kind of the chanting and the Vedic priests. And I've noticed that since I've been doing that, I just Ganesh kind of make sure the class comes out right and the readings come out right. And so I always make sure to honor those involved. So we'll start with some just a few minutes of Vedic chanting that kind of set the atmosphere, and people are coming late. Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Ganapatiye Namaha, Om Ganapatiye Namaha, Om Ganapatiye Namaha, Vakritunda Mahakaya, Surya Koti Samaprabha, Nirvigyam Kurme Deva, Sarvakaresh Sarvada, Janamulam Guru Murti, Pujamulam Guru Padam, Mantramulam Guru Vakyam, Mokshamulam Guru Kripa, Sahana Bhavatu, Sahano Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karvavahai, Tejasvina Vatitamastu Ma Vivishai Om Shanti Shanti Shanti, Om Aditaye Samaye Mangulai Buddhaye Cha, Guru Shukrashini Bischa, Rahave Ketave Namaha. Honoring the great ones, Lord Krishna, Goddess Saraswati, Goddess of Wisdom, Vedavyasa, writer and cognizer of the Vedas, and my tradition going back to Brahmananda Saraswati. Stand on the shoulders of many teachers, and too many to name here, actually. Sometimes start class by showing people who are in the class. So my upcoming classes, for those of you who don't know, my medical astrology class, part 2 is starting on 3 weeks from today, on Sunday the 13th. There was a preview of that yesterday, and there's a preview of the part 1 for those of you who like that topic. I'm also teaching a foundations class on Saturday, on Sunday mornings. That's starting in 3 weeks, and there's information on my website about that. And again, my classes are very, very deep, so even if it's called a foundations class, I mean, we're going into very deep topics that people don't cover. And again, our financial astrology class will actually be on Saturdays. The preview today is on Sunday. The class is on Saturday. At the moment, it's running 12 to 2 o'clock. Class is $325. If you have any special needs around payment, like payment plans or any other special needs, you can email me. If I get a lot of people from India that want to take it live, I may move the class up earlier in the morning so to help accommodate them, and sometimes that happens. But so that's kind of what's going on. Again, my contact information. So just a little bit more information. We talked about the schedule. I'll go through the individual lessons later because we're going to go to them in detail. For those of you who haven't participated in the first course, the first course is very practical. It's about remedies for dealing with finance problems. I'm going to review some of the points in there because some of you are going to need that. But it's a very practical course. It's on sale for $197. People, like I said, I specialize in investment astrology and predicting the stock market using astrology and things like that. But people came to me and they said, well, can you fix the money problems in my chart? So I put together this chart, and I did a lot of deep research. There's a lot of good information in it, and I'll review some of it, but it's a wonderful class. Okay, so those of you who want to study financial astrology on your own, usual books, Catherine Ponder, The Dynamic Laws of Prosperity, Shankar Ottawal, The Encyclopedia of Vedic Astrology, Wealth and Prosperity. Tony Patry has a minor book on how to make money using astrology, and other books on Vedic. Vasudev has a wonderful book called Vedic Astrology and Money Manners. But you can always, those of you who like books, most people can't learn astrology from a book, so they want a live teacher. So you get to ask questions in a live class. Okay, so let's go to the core of what we're supposed to do today. So I'm going to focus a lot on the 11th house, and I'm going to focus on signs and sources of income. If you sign up for the class, you get a copy of my PowerPoints, but I am, for the people who have signed up already for the class, I've distributed the 3rd edition of this class already. So I want to review, most of you, I'm very practical. I've got Virgo rising and then a Navamsha chart, and you know, there's part of me is a priest and part of me is a businessman. So I kind of combine the two with business astrology, and I'm very kind of practical. But some of the key points from part 1 of our class on financial astrology was first tithing. For those of you who want to increase income, or if you have blocks around finance, you have to donate regularly. And I learned this from my dad. Tithing is the most important things for increasing prosperity. And most people don't forget, you know, even sometimes people think they don't have enough money to tithe. Well, even if you don't have enough money, you can always find $5 instead of your Starbucks coffee to give to some charity. I've written articles on this. There's a whole lesson on this in my class. There's an article in my book, Finding Your Blind Spots Using Vedic Astrology, that if you have a block, let's say you have a weak Mars in your chart, and that's very connected to some area of your chart connected to finance, then you would donate like to a veterans group, because Mars governs soldiers and policemen and things like that. You do it on a Tuesday on a day ruled by Mars. So you can always make donations are good anyway, but you can't make specific donations from your chart. You know, sometimes I see people that have afflicted Venuses in their chart, that's debilitated Venuses. It has a lot to do with monetary expansion. It may be an important planet for their chart, and I tell them to donate to women, or if Venus is connected to Mars or Rahu or something, maybe to better women's shelter. So you can specifically look at the chart, and we teach this in part 1 on how to find ways to donate to increase your prosperity. And even if you don't know this information, you know, just pick a good source and regularly donate money. It's even better to donate regularly, like weekly, rather than just like once a month or once a year or something like that, because then it's just, you're just kind of continuing the flow. And that's one of the best ways to increase income source. Now we have a lot of material in part 1 on from the money gurus, and you know, the main point from Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich is clearly in his title. You have to have a positive attitude. You know, if your mind is filled with thoughts, poor me, I can't make any money, you know, I can't save any money, you know, you're planting weed seeds. So you're thinking, if you have a lot of negative thinking, it plants weed seeds. So you have to be grateful, you have to be positive, and then you have to get out there and act. You know, if you act like a victim, poor me, I can't get a job, like no one wants to pay me, you know, you're reinforcing that. So you've got to kind of pull up the weeds in your mind, and as we think, so we create. And one of my spiritual teachers gave a wonderful story. He said, you know, if you do enough sadhana, if you do enough meditation and spiritual work, you should be able to witness the craziness in your mind. And, you know, we have these random thoughts like, I'm not good enough, I can't do it, all that stuff. And what you have to do is you have to catch those and say, stop, replace, cancel, you know, and replace it. I'm a great creator. People are attracted to my work. They want to buy my products. They want to pay me lots of money. You have to kind of catch your negative thoughts and replace them. And that's and it's not just mood making. It's kind of like, you know, if you have a lot of weeds growing up and you give them attention, they're going to, if you water your weeds, you're going to have a weed forest. You know, if you want to you know, water positive thoughts. And one of my teachers used the analogy of people that like have this victim consciousness. Every time somebody does something to them, they go on for 5 or 6 weeks talking about so-and-so did this to me and that to me. And he said, it's like swimming in the sewer water, you know, and enjoying it, you know. So you don't want to bask in your negative thoughts and your failures. You have to kind of be positive and think ahead. Again, I have a whole lesson, 2 lessons on wisdom of the money gurus in the first part. You can read positive books like Catherine Ponder's The Dynamic Laws of Prosperity. Deepak Chopra's The 7 Laws of Success. You know, you just have to kind of, you have to, when I was first starting my journey with all of this, and I was a college, poor college student, you know, teaching classes and things like that. I used to drive up to Iowa City, and in the car I would listen to all these success gurus, you know, talking about things they need to do, and it had a positive impact on me. And it really, you know, I did become very successful. And you have to train the mind, and so you have to kind of, you know, get out of the pity party. If you have problems with self-esteem, a lot of financial problems are connected to self-esteem. I'm not good at, you know, if your subconscious is going, I'm not good enough to make, you know, $100,000, or I'm not good enough to have a wonderful job that supports my life and nourishes me. You know, you've got a lot of people have these broken records going in the background. You've got to do work. Jack Canfield is great for doing work with self-esteem. You can pick up his videos on YouTube. He has a lot of positive videotapes. His books are great. He's got courses on self-esteem. And one of the things he has you do is kind of look in the mirror every night before you go in bed and sink into the subconscious and do positive self-talk. Like, God, I did a great job today. I made a great presentation to my boss. I made a lot of money today. You know, or just do a lot of positive self-talk about how good you are. And praising yourself is the hardest thing in the world, because we're taught as kids, you know, don't praise yourself because you're going to be arrogant or you're going to be boastful. And, you know, so sometimes the opposite happens. But we need to praise ourselves, and our good qualities come from the divine. So we're not praising our ego, we're praising the qualities the divine gave us. So positive self-talk is very important. You can do that at night. And there are a lot of practical Vedic remedies that you can do. We talked about them in the part 1 class. Vishnu Sahasranam is one that I recommend a lot. It's 100,008 names of Vishnu. And Vishnu is the god of maintenance, and so very connected to Mercury and Saturn. So he's very connected to business and infrastructure. And so I tell people on Wednesdays and Saturdays, Wednesdays ruled by Mercury, Saturday connected to Saturn, to at least maybe listen to Vishnu Sahasranam. It's on YouTube. If you have a Vedic background, you probably learned how to chant it when you were 15 or something. But and mantras are always done with devotion, and you have to be vegetarian for them to work effectively. This people, you know, in modern society, people have gotten into, non-vegetarian diets, and I don't have any. Some people have to do that for medical reasons, but the energies of you know, is very heavy when you eat meat, and these Vedic mantras don't work. So if you want to have success with Vedic mantras, you have to be vegetarian. In part 1, we covered a lot of practical remedies on the course. So for example, you can even study the hour of your birth and the time of day that you were born, and that will tell you something about what remedies are needed to remedy finances in your court. And I can't, you know, that was a whole 2-hour lesson in my part 1 class, but there are all kinds of fun things you can do like that. We studied yogi points and parts of fortune and Yamaganta points. I've written articles on these, they're in my book. But these kind of don't manifest that often. Once in a while you get Jupiter or Venus hitting them, and they may be a good time to invest or a good time to do something auspicious, but they don't happen that much. But we did teach them in part 1. And then we had a whole lesson in part 1 on investing from your chart, which is tricky because we have to remember that you have to tithe to be successful. Now, speculation is 5th house, and 5th house is also sports and romance. So it's kind of a fun house. It's not necessarily it's not kind of some people kind of, if you put Rahu in the 5th house, you're kind of prone to gambling, and people who gamble ultimately give it all back. And I find this with my traders charts that, you know, they can make a lot of money and then they lose it all. So I always teach people in the investment lesson that you've got to take 10% of your winnings out and tithe it to your favorite charity, because we're dealing with speculation. We have to tell the universe, I'm going to take this money that I speculated on and give it back to my favorite charity. So I'm showing that this money is being used to help the universe. We have to do tithing. We also have to kind of take money out when we make investments and save it. And you know, but investing is about preparing this long-term thing. It's about preparing for the future, for our retirement. And most of you, you know, when I started out in this industry, I didn't think I'd be retiring. You know, when you're 20, when you're 30 or something, you don't think about 65. I'm 65 now, you know, but you have to plan for your retirement. It sneaks up on you, and you have to kind of make your money grow, and that's long-term investing in the stock market and long-term investing in things that make money over time. People want to get rich quick. They want to use astrology to kind of like, oh, I'm going to make a fortune in gold and retire and things like that. You know, the universe doesn't work that way. We have a purpose in society. We have to kind of help people, and our purpose is not just to get rich quickly. And investment is financial astrology should not be used for that. There's nothing wrong with that, and that's, you know, but we also want to, if we do that, we have to give back to the universe. Okay, so where are we going in part 2? And you don't have to have taken part 1 to take part 2, although it'd be useful. And again, part 2 is not starting for 3 weeks, and there's only 9 lessons in part 1 if you want to pick it up. But and I didn't get on this call to sell part 1. I actually, you know, I have lots of income from all kinds of sources, but and my classes are very, very cheap. I don't charge $1,600 for a class. I mean, these classes are very inexpensive. So what are we going to do in part 2? Well, one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to look at, have a couple lessons, maybe just one lesson on investing in the stock market by sector. And it turns out Jupiter and Saturn and Rahu and Ketu that, you know, move very slowly. When they impact certain signs of the zodiac, they can have an impact. Now, just think about this. In January, Saturn went into Capricorn, and Saturn and Capricorn aspects the sign of Cancer. It aspects the sign of Pisces. It aspects the sign of Libra. Now, what's happened since Saturn went into Capricorn? Well, COVID hit, which is certainly very connected to Saturn and Capricorn. But actually, Saturn governs infrastructure. So I think, you know, actually, it was interesting last week. Economic news came out, and they're still building housing. And it's not, construction has not stopped with COVID. And to me, that's interesting because Saturn and Capricorn supports construction. And I think we will get an infrastructure bill from the government to get people back to work, like in the 30s, and they'll be building bridges and tunnels and things like that. And that's all Capricorn. So Saturn and Capricorn should support Capricorn. But Saturn, you know, when you have Saturn and Capricorn, it's more malefic. It causes more harm. Now, what people don't understand, well, Saturn is good in its own sign for Capricorn. So Capricorn rising has done really well with Saturn and Capricorn. But if you're not, and not totally, because Saturn always causes problems, but Saturn, depends what dasha you're in and what else is going on. But the signs that Saturn Saturn's aspects are stronger when it's in Capricorn. They're more malefic. So Cancer, the sign of Cancer, which is aspected by Saturn, governs the food industry, restaurants, cruises, and hotels. You know, they've taken a huge hit, haven't they? And you know, certainly grocery stores are in demand. You know, but restaurants, which is very connected, the whole food industry has taken a huge hit from Saturn aspect in Cancer. The cruise industry has been decimated. The hotel industry has been decimated. People aren't traveling. That's all Saturn aspect in Cancer. So when Saturn gets out of Cancer in May 2022, maybe those industries will come back. So maybe if those prices are still low going into, you know, the beginning of 2022, those stocks would be a buy. We also have Saturn has been aspecting Libra. What does Libra govern? Well, it governs entertainment, cinema, even merchant shops. And you know, the scales of Libra are not actually the scales of justice, although some people, you know, there may be something to that. Scales of Libra are the ancient scales that people used to measure when you bought and sell things. So they put something on the scale, and they, you know, put your money on the scale. I don't know exactly how that worked, but Libra is a very kind of merchant-oriented sign. Venus is a very business planet. But so what's happened to Saturn aspecting Libra? Well, we've got all these shops closing. We have AMC's been closed since March, and they're finally opening to 15-cent movies to try to get people into theaters. Good luck. Disneyland was closed for a while. They reopened. I don't know how many people are going back. You know, maybe Netflix is doing well. Their stock has gone great up, but a lot of Libra industries have been decimated. So we'll be looking at industries. Now we have Rahu and Ketu changing signs. Now Rahu aspects has trinal aspects. Rahu's been in Gemini, aspecting Aquarius and also Libra. Rahu aspect, now Rahu, Aquarius is very connected to Rahu, and we've had this huge jump in technology stocks because Rahu in Gemini has been aspecting Aquarius. Now Rahu's changing at the end of September. Maybe we're going to get a rest in this huge run up in technology. I mean, I was looking for Apple to hit 492. It hit it on Friday. I mean, it could go higher. You know, a lot of these tech stocks are really overdone. I don't think they're done with at all, but we may get a rest. But what will Rahu do when it goes into Taurus and when it has new aspects onto Capricorn and Virgo? Ketu has the opposite effect. Ketu takes away. So what is Ketu going to do when it goes into Scorpio? So we can look at stock sectors in this way, and it's kind of fascinating thing to do. What else are we going to do in part two? We're going to look at timing gold and cryptocurrencies a little bit. Gold has had this huge run up. It was easy to predict, but it's getting toppy. It's not that it's done. My work shows that gold will go up into May 2021, and we have this wonderful. If you read my article this weekend, we have this wonderful trine from Jupiter in Sagittarius, a fire sign to Sun in Leo, into the second week of May, and I suspect we're going to have a big run up in gold. First couple, even though it's consolidating so far, it's going to have another push up into early September, and then it's going to be really overdone, and it'll rest for a little bit. But it's not done. And I mean, obviously, gold's going to go probably over, and silver's been running up too. Bitcoin has been doing well this year. I've been following Bitcoin in my newsletter. Cryptocurrencies are ruled by Ketu. Ketu, as you know, you used to say Ketu governs like the innards of watches or mechanical things. And obviously, in modern times now, Ketu governs computers. And cryptocurrencies are very kind of basically just totally electronic. So Ketu is a significator for cryptos, and the Bitcoin chart, which I have going back to 2007, 2008, I can't remember the date, actually may be lost because my database crashed, it's a Sag rising chart. And so with Jupiter retrograding back into Sag now and staying there until November, the Sag, having Jupiter in its own sign in the first house in the crypto charts is supportive for cryptos, for Bitcoin rising. And, will it continue? I always worry with cryptos whether the government's going to regulate them out of existence, again, because you're competing with worthless bonds that we want people to buy. Okay, another part of our upcoming class is on Muhurta and business. I have 2 lessons on this scheduled. First of all, do you have the yogas for starting your own business? Usually you want benefics in the 3rd, 6th, 10th, and the 11th to be in business for yourself. You want your 10th house stronger than your 6th house. So 6th house is about everyday work. 10th house is more like if you have your own business and you're a CEO and manager of your business. Which one is stronger in your chart? Do you have enough business benefics in the 3rd, 6th, and 10th, 11th to be your own boss? And if you do, you have to start a business at an auspicious time to give it a good start. My financial business had a good Muhurta that I did in 1992, in May of 1992, and it was Leo rising with Sun exalted in Aries, and my Sun period kicked in 1993 because of the way I set up the chart. And my business took off in 1993 in a big way, and almost 28 years later, I still have this business because it had a good Muhurta. And so in business astrology, you want to start businesses when the sun is waxing. That's after Makara Sankranti, when sun goes into Capricorn, business sign, starts the business year into Guru Purnima, until the sun goes into Cancer. And that's the waxing part of the sun, like the waxing part of the moon, and that's when you want to start a business. So we're not in a good time period for starting businesses now, but you can get ready for them, and you can find an auspicious time. And the other thing is, when you start a business, you want to start in a good dasha, and people don't do this. I mean, I have colleagues who are very good at picking good businesses, but the dasha that you start out with is based on the nakshatra of the moon. If the moon, for example, if you have a really great chart, and I've seen this, and you can never get every planet perfect in a chart, in a Muhurta chart, but let's say you have you have a very weak Saturn, and it's very poorly placed in the 12th house. And let's say you start your business in Pusha Nakshatra, when moon's in Pusha Nakshatra. Pusha is usually an auspicious place to start things, but you're starting in a Saturn period. And if Saturn is poorly placed, you're going to have your business as a start in a Saturn period. So you have to kind of get very creative with Muhurtas. And you can also use Muhurtas in marketing. If you're starting a campaign, you can pick different days to start it on that are more auspicious, and you can get better results. I used to get 20% results from my mailings when I used to mail stuff at a good Muhurta. So these are kind of practical things you can do with business astrology. What about predicting the future of a country's finances? We're going to have a couple lessons on this, this could be a whole course in itself, but I'm just going to throw in a couple lessons. And I also have a couple lessons on corporate charts and how to analyze corporate charts. So these are kind of new things that aren't taught very much, kind of business astrology. Again, a lot of the stuff is very practical, but we also have some other material. So today, and continuing into our next lesson on September 12th, we're going to look at sources of income from your chart. I'm going to pause for a second. Anybody have any questions? I'm going to unmute you all, which means you can change your orange mics green and ask a question, and then I will mute you all again in a minute because I don't want any vacuum cleaners coming on. Any questions on anything I've said? You can also write a question in the chat box. Sometimes it's hard for me to monitor those, but I will look for them. Okay, we do have a question from Siddharth. Siddharth, did you have a question?
Yes. So,
okay, can you speak up a little bit?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, just speak loudly.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay. So the part 2 also covers part 1 along with the new topics, right?
No, part 1 is available to watch on your own.
Okay.
It's $197. It's available on videotape with PowerPoint, so you can watch it on your own. It's only 9 lessons, so you can get through it. You don't need part 1 to take part 2. And that's just because it's a completely different knowledge.
Okay. And part 1 is more about personal finance, and part 2 is about like general finance, and how you can use a general finance for your own personal thing.
Part 2 is more about investment finance, business astrology, but there are some new topics that I'm covering in here. Like even today's lesson, which will continue. I am doing some other material that I just never got to cover in part 1. But Okay, good question.
I'm actually, I've been to your website, and I was very much interested in the financial astrology regarding the stock market and like some GAN analysis that you have done.
Right.
Like is there an overlap, or is it like completely different course?
Well, I have 43 lessons on my website on investment astrology. It's learning how to predict market behavior using astrology, using Vedic astrology. And there's 4 modules on it. A couple of those modules, actually only one of those modules will become part of this class, and that's how to time and trade gold using Vedic astrology. But all the other information on the stock market is not going to be covered too much in this live course. It is available, in various modules, and I can work with you if you want to study that material. I can't mentor people on that material anymore because I don't have time. But I'm, the material is very self-sufficient.
Okay, thank you, Barry.
Great. Okay, so I'm going to continue. I'm going to mute you all again. Okay, so let's go into today's material. So what we're going to do today, and when we have our next lesson on September 12th, we're going to look at sources of income from your chart. So I wanted to give something practical. How do we increase our income from our chart? How do we see what our sources of income are in our chart? And this, unfortunately, is not something I can even cover completely in an hour and a half today. So it will bleed into the next lesson also. And so I do apologize. Part of the problem is if you don't know Arudas, and I have to send you some extra tapes on Arudas, then you won't be able to calculate this. And I apologize. I don't know how many people. Jaimini astrology is very rich, and the Arudas are actually more of the material manifestation level in our charts, and they're not paid enough attention to. And there are different calculations for them. The computer programs do them, but they're very important in predicting the material world. So if you're predicting income, you have to know the 11th house from the Aruda Lagna, not the 11th house from the Rashi chart, and that's what people get wrong. And this is kind of more advanced material that I've done a lot of research on. And also, the other thing is there are other Arudas in the chart that are indications of career success and financial success too, and they're very important in prediction. And so probably for people who are signed up, I have a number of people signed up for the class already. I will send you some extra tapes on Aruda so you can study them, because I don't have time to teach how to calculate them and stuff like that, and you can't even do that today because it'll bore you and you'll go over your head. But they are important. But we will do some stuff today that is practical that you can use to increase your income from your chart. Okay. So when we look at increasing income from the chart, there are a couple things. The 11th house, which everybody thinks is the house of income, is not really about income as much as people think it is. The 11th from the Aruda Lagna is about income. And the 11th house from the moon, the 10th and the 11th houses from the moon are very important sources for wealth in your chart. That has nothing to do with Aruda, so you can all figure that out. So we'll focus a little bit on that. And the other thing is that, money and career go up and down. That's because our chart rotates. You go into a new dasha period, the chart rotates around the dasha lord, suddenly your income houses are different. You go into, and I do a lot with chara dasha, which is connected to more of the material level of life. And those, the chart rotates around various signs of the zodiac. And when those periods change, the positioning of everything changes, and your income changes, your source of money, your relationships change. So that's how really astrology works, is all these rotations that occur in the dasha charts. And so even if you have stuff in your natal chart, it may not kick in until a certain period. So it's always kind of this juggling act. Okay. So let's just talk about the meaning of the 11th house in general, just from the normal 11th house. The 11th house may require a lot of effort, and it creates a lot of stress. Now, the thing that people don't ever know about the 11th house, everybody says, oh, the 11th house is wonderful because you put any planet in the 11th house and it blossoms. Well, that's true, But the 11th house is also a health house because it's 6 from the 6. So you put a lot of, even if you put a lot of effort into your 11th house energy, you may make money, but your health may get ruined. And that's what happens with business people. Sometimes they make a lot of money, but their health is destroyed in the process. So the 11th house is actually kind of a Maya house because we think that money is going to kind of make us happy, and there's this illusion about it, and then we realize that it doesn't. And so somehow the 11th house is this kind of illusionary house that teaches us that eventually we're disappointed in the material world, and it doesn't mean that we don't need money or that it's not important, but the 11th house often teaches us that there's this Maya aspects to us, The 11th house can also be our highest house of service too, where we put our individual energy forth to do something bigger for society. Again, the 11th sign of the zodiac is Aquarius, and Aquarius is always about philanthropic work and humanitarian work and putting our efforts forth to help society. So one of the things that we have to do is in looking for sources of income from your house, we have to understand signs really well, and we can't talk about there's a whole language in business and financial astrology for signs and nakshatras and planets because we're interested in very material things. The sun, yes, the sun desires confidence, but confidence builds confidence and courage and leadership, but those are important things, but the sun also rules gold, and it rules, so it's also somewhat connected to shares of stock. So we have to learn a whole different language in financial astrology. But when we're trying to decide about sources of income from our chart, again, we're going to look at the 11th from the moon. We're going to look at the 10th from the moon for kind of maybe work that we're going to enjoy doing. And we're going to look at 11th from the moon is 2nd from the 10th. So it's money from work we enjoy doing. So, you can all do that. And then we're going to look at signs and planets connected to the above. Now, the trick, Vedic astrology is very complex. And if I have a class online, it's called Finding Your Life Purpose. And we have 16 lessons on different ways to find your life purpose, and very complex. And so some of the ones, when I'm going to give you a list here of how do we translate career and into signs of the zodiac, but you can apply this to your sun sign, so to your rising sign, to your 10th house lord, to the 10th house sign, or the first house sign in your D10, should be D10. The 11th from the moon will produce income, and the 11th from the real lagna will produce income. So these are like 6 ways that you can look for sources of income in your chart. So if you're Pisces, I have a Pisces sun and Scorpio rising. So when we look at the signs of the zodiac for things that we might do professionally or sources of income, we have to look at our sun sign, which is obviously connected to our outer existence. We have to look at our rising sign, which, by nature, if you're a Scorpio rising, it's the 8th sign of the zodiac. You're going to be interested in astrology. You're going to be interested in mystical things. You're going to be, if you don't have a spiritual chart, you're going to be interested in 8th house vices like drugs and alcohol. 8th house is kind of deep psychology too. So if you're a Scorpio rising, those things are natural things that go there. But this also transfers to what sign owns your 10th house. Maybe that has something that will color your career. If your 10th house is Leo, like mine is, maybe you're more drawn to leadership positions, being in management, being involved in the stock market, which all the things that I have done. If your 10th, and then we have to look at the 10th house and the first house in the D10 chart, and those will also, those signs will also be important. So I have Pisces rising in my D10 chart with Mercury and Venus and something else in there, Moon, I think. the 3 benefics in there. It's been good for my career to have those 3 planets in my chart. It also kind of makes me a poet. Mercury and Venus in the 1st house and a writer, and I am a poet. But it's just Pisces also makes me a spiritual teacher. So the rising sign of the D10 will make me a spiritual teacher. We can also look at the 11 from the moon as a source of income. So again, that's 10th from the moon is kind of the work that we love to do. And 11 from the moon is money that we earn from work that we like to do. So 11th from the moon is very important for producing income. And then we can also, the most important one, which we can talk about a little bit, and we'll probably spend a whole lesson on when we start the class September 12th with lesson 2, is the 11 from the Arula Lagna. And again, I have to, those of you who have enrolled in the course, I'll be sending you probably 3 videotapes on Gemini astrology and the Arula Lagna, so you can learn how to calculate it and you understand it. Gemini astrology has changed my life, and there's so much more in it than Parashari astrology. And I've only been studying it for about 6 years, and it's changed my life. Okay, so in my investment class, I talk about signs of the zodiac in different industries. So this is when we look at stock industry. I have to expand this list because it's kind of outdated. But so when we look at commodities and when we look at stock in sectors to buy and stuff like that, and I'll expand this list when we get to that lesson. Aries is connected to wheat of all things. They always knows that Mars has a wheat component. Aries, Aries makes engineers, so it's connected to machinery, iron, steel, coal. Stock shares even, metals, diamonds is a surprise to me, but anyway, that was listed. Taurus is sweet, right? We know Taurus is a sweet sign connected to sugar, wheat, clothes, textiles, we know that, jewels, exchanges, banks and banking, cattle, Taurus the bull. This cattle governs the cattle industry. Not a sattvic industry in India, but certainly something that still happens in the United States. Gemini easily relates to publications, railways, vehicles, casinos, colleges and educational institutions, telephones. And again, I have a bigger list. Cancer, silver, landed property like home, cruise lines, agricultural, milk, restaurants, hotels, municipal bonds. Leo, gold, currencies, casinos, stock brokerage companies. Virgo, corn, grains, professional health institutions, medical institutions, health services. Libra, wheat, cotton, silk. So these are all. This is all cookbook stuff. I'm going to bore you if I go over this. But what I did is I added some material that I haven't done before. Is I looked at profession from signs, because sometimes when I'm looking at, we'll have 2 lessons on finding your life purpose in the class, and sometimes there are different ways you can do that. But sometimes you'll find a sign of the zodiac that's that comes up 2 or 3 times for your life purpose, and you have to kind of know how to translate that. And there's a technique that we'll learn, which is new, that I haven't even taught in my life purpose class before. I believe you have to look at the kendras from the moon and the overlap with the trines in the Karakamsha Rashi chart, which is a Gemini chart, and then that gives you a special sign of the zodiac, which is supposedly connected to your life purpose. I'm going to teach that in this course. It's new material. But if that sign comes out to be Aries, what does it mean? Well, these might be, it's hard to do an exhaustive list of every single profession connected to Aries, but obviously soldiers, sports and fitness people, policemen, those are obvious. Chemists and engineers, it's also kind of obvious if you know Aries and Mars. Technicians, mechanical people who fix things. Hairstylists, because you've got Bharani Nakshatra, which is kind of an artist sign in Aries. You've got healers and medical doctors, often Ashvini, even vets. Ashvini is the horses. Acupuncturists, directors of theater, sales, athletes, physical therapists, coaches. So basically, if you had Sun in Aries, if you were Aries rising, if Aries owned the first house in your D10 or the 10th house in your D10, if if Aries was to sign the 11th from your moon, that would be these professions might be a source of income for you. Okay, so that's how this is working, and I'm not going to go through all of them because you'll be bored, but they're in the PowerPoints. So Taurus is connected to material arts like sculpture or ceramics, people who make kind of physical artistic things. Jewelry making is very Taurus. Home decorating is very Taurus. Working with fabrics, if you're a fashion designer, that's very Taurus. You're a jeweler, that's very Taurus. Perfumes, all those material, beautiful things. Working with, second sign of the zodiac is also food, right? So Taurus is the other sign connected to restaurants and foods. Will Rahu retrograding into Taurus suddenly create a revival for restaurants? Are they going to finally open up the restaurants and let those people survive their industries? We'll see. Bankers and money managers, banking is a big thing. Second house, second sign of the zodiac. Holding on to money is a big Taurus thing. Portfolio managers, many of these investment bankers often have so much Taurus, they hold on to money. Gardening, home decorating, singing, singers are second sign of the zodiac is voice, right? Gemini, I've got Gemini in my chart, a lot of Gemini in my chart that's important. Computers, mathematics, accounting, lecturing, sales, journalism, media, again, this is what I call cookbook Jyotish. In my classes, I will give you this material, but if I gave a lecture on each sign of the zodiac connected to work-related and money-related things, you would be bored and go to sleep. So, but it's interesting. I was trying to develop a more modern list for people and include more things, but some of it and some of it you wouldn't think about. Virgo is a very service-oriented and healing-oriented sign of the zodiac. When I ever see Virgo coming up, I'm always talking about healing and massage and things like that. But sometimes Virgo is about bookkeeping, but a lot of healers come out of Virgo, but also very technical things like bookkeeping and researching and auditing and things like that. Writing, of course. Libra, of course, Libra is more the softer side of Venus with, painting and poetry and music. So, again, I mentioned Libra is a very kind of merchant sign. So being a shop owner, starting a shop, wanting to sell things, is very kind of Libra oriented. Libras make good judges and lawyers, of course. That's the other part of the scales, but they're good merchants to advertisers, marketers, counselors, mediators, things like that. Scorpio, that's me. Spiritual teachers, healers, psychics, surgeons. Chemistry is very involved with Scorpio. It's something I'm not always sure why. Pharmaceuticals, for that matter, chemistry. Casey is very involved in. Is the co-owner of Scorpio, so computers, technicians, funeral work, death is very Scorpio. I find that psychologists and counselors and astrologers come out of Scorpio quite a bit because we're interested in the 8th house and how the mind works and helping people and counseling them. So dark side of Scorpio, coroners, spies, alcohol industry, drug industry, assassins, those are all very real too. Sag creates what lawyers, college professors, ministers, priests, judges, travel agents, publishers, gurus, legal advocates. Capricorn is the real business sign. And people, sometimes people forget that about Capricorn. Capricorn is really the biggest business sign, very earthy. Those people like to create companies into engineering, construction, crude oil, forest working, camping, anything turning to outdoors. Aquarius. Aquarius to me is the most interesting sign of the zodiac because it has Shatabishak Nakshatra in it, which is connected to like biotech and the It's the nakshatra of 100 healers and 100 doctors. So there's a lot of healthcare can come out of Aquarius. Aviation comes out of Aquarius, although that's something you get from Western astrology, but it's very true. Space exploration, invention. Now, somebody like founder of Tesla, Elon Musk, I think a friend of mine rectified his chart. We don't have his time, but he's Aquarius rising, just brilliant inventor, just kind of digging deep and researching, engineer, all that, all that stuff, very, very powerful. New Age workers connected to Aquarius. Pisces, counselors, psychologists, priests, ministers, that makes sense. It's a Brahmin sign. It's connected to bringing people to God, bringing people to enlightenment, connected to gurus. But, if it's not a spiritual chart, it can be connected to pharmaceuticals, to museum workers, to marine biologists, things like that. So this list is not exhaustive, and I have a list for nakshatras too. I don't know if I'll even have time to put it in the class, but I have taught it before. Each nakshatra is connected to different professions too, so you can get more microscopic information out of the nakshatras. Okay, so okay, planets in business and finance. So we looked at signs. We have to know planets and their relationship to business and finance too, right? So Sun obviously is connected to power, vitality, authority, presidents, CEOs, senior officers, political leaders, citizens of stature, industrial entrepreneurship. So, your CEOs come out of Leo. President Trump's a Leo. Often presidents of countries end up being Leo. The question is Leo well placed in their chart, or is it badly afflicted? And is the sun badly afflicted? And you get people like Saddam Hussein has an exalted sun. Hitler had an exalted sun. They were great leaders, but they, if you look at the rest of the chart, it's a mess. So Leo is connected to places of entertainment. Now, that always surprises me, but it's like casinos are connected to Leo. And the movie industry is very connected to Leo because the stars come out of Leo. And that's particularly Purva Phalguni Nakshatra. Bankers and stock markets and stockbrokers and come out of Sun and Leo. Moon and Cancer. So Moon governs price fluctuation, masses, common people, public opinion, apartment stores, hotels, catering concerns, and restaurants. So again, we've got that Saturn aspect from Capricorn to Cancer onto, and how many department stores are going bankrupt now, and how many hotel chains are coming next because of this whole thing. And restaurants, we're going to lose 60% of our restaurants. It's just Saturn is the Grim Reaper, isn't it? Mars and Aries, again, defense industry, armed forces, military police, also surgeons, dentists, butchers, metals and iron, tea, tobacco. The tobacco industry is connected to Aries and Mars. Coffee, again, that kick we get from caffeine is very Aries. Property and building materials, railway shares, petrochemicals. Mercury with Gemini, Virgo, communication, literary pursuits. Again, we went over this already. Colleges, teaching, textile, cotton, things like that. Jupiter, Pisces, Sagittarius. Jupiter is the planet of expansion. Wherever Jupiter goes, it brings good luck and good fortune. We'll talk about that in a minute. It's a planet of expansion connected to religion, philosophies, finance, and capitalism, education, bankers, judges, lawyers, that kind of thing. We did that already. Venus rules Taurus and Libra, so it likes to mediate. It likes to create harmony and peace. If you're a mediation person, if you're a lawyer, you're trying to create peace between two parties who are trying to settle dispute. But Venus is another planet of expansion. It expands, or Venus, the two benefics, Venus and Jupiter, expand prices, and so when they're strong, they allow prices to go up. Venus rules cotton, sugar, silk, wheat, copper, silver, foods industries, jewelry, and the film industry. So again, double whammy with Saturn aspecting Libra and Cancer against the food industry and the hotel industry. Saturn, Capricorn, Aquarius. Again, Saturn governs democracy, the elderly, farmers. It does bring loss. We know Saturn takes away, and it's always, you know, for Capricorn, Saturn can be good, but for everybody else, we don't like it. Farm products, public buildings, steel plants, and coal mines are connected to Saturn. Rahu and Aquarius, Rahu governs Aquarius. Rahu is connected to gambling, to science and invention, to psychology, to biotech, to internet, wireless, and electrical goods, aerial investigation. So, you know, Rahu, we forget that Rahu has this very kind of creative part to it. I mean, always something in regular Vedic astrology, we always think about, oh, Rahu's such a bad guy. But, you know, Rahu has this creative impulse to kind of be inventive and to do something beyond the ordinary. And so Aquarius, Rahu, you know, we get all this inventive energy coming out of there. And we get technology coming out of Rahu, but you know, we have this whole issue, this technology for the good or for the not so good. We have people wanting to use technology like 5G to, you know, increase internet speeds, but it's been shown that the frequency is very detrimental to people's health. And we just heard good news that Elon Musk has a space-oriented 5G antenna platform that will put the other 5G people out of business, and it has a more beneficial frequency wave that won't be harmful, but will give us the high-speed internet that we want. Ketu takes away, right? It governs spirituality, asceticism, spiritual initiation. It does have that Mars aspect to it, so it can explode in anger with military prowess. Connected to foreign languages, psychics, medical science, computer programming, all those wonderful things. Okay. I'm talking a whole lot faster than I wanted to. You'll get a copy of the tape. You can listen to it again. Let me just take a pause. I'll unmute you for any quick questions. Again, what I had to do here was what I have to do sometimes in the first lesson of any course. It's called Cookbook Jyotish. You have to kind of have a language to talk about things. For those of you who are taking my class officially, you should be studying things because you need to kind of know off the top of your head that, you know, we know sun is confidence and courage and leadership, but, you know, we have to remember that sun is gold and currencies and stock market, stockbrokers and all these other things. So, you know, casinos or things like that. So it's good to take time to go over these points and learn the material. I'll take a quick question here. I'm unmuting you all. So you have the ability to turn your orange mic green and ask a question.
Barry, quick one about the Arudas. What rule do you use for the Kendras? Do you use it as in Parashara?
I've been following Kan Rao lately.
That's what I have.
Yeah, I'm using Kan Rao with Arudas, yeah. And I have videotapes going on that, you know, if you're interested in taking this class. But yeah, I use Kan Rao.
Thank you.
Kan Rao has 50 years of experience with Jaimini astrology and all this material. And there's this whole controversy about, or there's, you know, all these things, but finally I've settled on Kan Rao as being the authority. He's got 50 years experience. And my friends who have like looked at all the other approaches, you know, they say, you know, a lot of these things just don't work. And Kan Rao stuff does work in practice when you test it. So, okay, good question. Okay, other questions? Okay, so let's get back to the 11th house a little bit. I'm going to mute you all again so you don't put on your vacuum cleaners. So what is the real meaning of the 11th house if it's not the source of money in your chart? So planets in the 11th house will support gains for you. So that's how we should look at it. So moon in the 11th house may mean that your mother will support and fulfill your desire. So, you know, if your son is in the 11th house, your father will support and fulfill your desire. So, you know, if you have Mars in the 11th house, maybe your brothers will. And that's kind of old Jyotish, you know, when everybody looks at family members. But, you know, any of those significations would be important. So any planet in the 11th house will support gains for you. Now, Lord of the 11th house will, and its placement will also show you where gains will come from. So you have Lord of the 11th and the 7th. Your gains will come from a business partner or a spouse. If you have Lord of the 11th and the 4th, you'll have gains from property or real estate. So, you know, you can always look at the 11th house Lord and see what house it goes into to show where your gains will come from. And that's important. Now, you don't want the 11th Lord in Udusthana, 6th, 8th, or the 12th house. It will kind of block gains from happening, and you'll be frustrated, and we'll have to do remedies to kind of remove that. So in fact, if you have the Lord of the 11th and the 6th, it can make you cruel and have a worried mind and create health problems. So not a good placement. Let's look at Jupiter. So Jupiter is connected to it's the Karaka for the 2nd, 5th, 9th, and 11th houses. So they're all those houses are connected to money. So Jupiter is very critical in your chart for bringing money. Even Jupiter in Capricorn, in a very material sign of the zodiac, even though it's quote unquote debilitated there, will produce money. And that's kind of the funny thing about people don't understand debilitated planets. But the problem with Jupiter and Capricorn is it loses its ethical and moral values. So it may make money from stealing or from unethical practice. And I think Bernie Madoff, I don't have my database got wiped out in a crash. Bernie Madoff, I think, is Capricorn rising with Jupiter in the 1st house in Capricorn, and he made all that money through his Ponzi scheme. And in his Jupiter period, he made all this money. He went into Saturn period. Saturn's a ready reckoner, and you know, he was found out and sent to jail. So Jupiter, you know, even Jupiter will make you money, but are you doing it ethically, even in Capricorn? So we have to study the influences of Jupiter in your chart to see sources of wealth. So for example, or things that you're just lucky with. So you can always, whenever, I'm gonna put up my chart here. So I'm Scorpio rising. I'm sorry I use South Indian for this. I use both North and South in the class, but for my personal work now I do South. So I have Jupiter in the 8th house in Gemini with Ketu, which is, Jupiter is, and I have a very powerful Jupiter because it's stationary. It went stationary 3 hours later, even so it's retrograde, but it was a very powerful Jupiter. Jupiter is particularly lucky for me, and the fact that it's in Gemini means that I have luck with Gemini-related things. Gemini governs libraries. I used to be a librarian. I got to master finding anything in the library because I had that stationary Jupiter in Gemini. I thought I was going to be a professional librarian, and then I went on. Jupiter Ketu conjunction is good for Jyotish and Jaimini astrology in particular. And so my 8th house is a house of esoteric occult knowledge. So my stationary Jupiter in Gemini has given me, you know, great talent in the astrological realm. Gemini is also about writing, communications, blogging, videos, and film. I have a doctoral minor in film studies. That's Jupiter in Gemini. I have my blog has been very successful. You know, I'm a writer. I mean, I've written 4 books in the last 3 years. I've got a 5th one coming out next month. There's, you know, so Jupiter, wherever Jupiter goes in your chart, it's going to bring luck to the significations of that sign and also to the planets that are with it. So it's a very simple thing to do. You can just see what sign of the zodiac your Jupiter is in and where it's going to bring luck to. And this is particularly true for certain signs of the zodiac, certainly Cancer, Leo, Aries, Scorpio, Sag, and Pisces. You know, Jupiter is just a great planet for them. Now, Libra and Taurus, it's not as great. Mercury, Gemini, and Virgo, it's a Marika, but it's still, Jupiter is a benefic. It does bring luck, but it's going to be more significant luck if, depending on the rising sign. And so whatever sign Jupiter is in is going to bring luck and talent to those things. So that can be a source of income. Where is your Jupiter in your chart? Now, you can also look at Jupiter aspects. The aspects of Jupiter are going to also bring luck. So Jupiter is aspecting Aquarius. And I got a scholarship to study computer science out of high school back in 1972, when we just had automated, when we just had, when the computer people were just very new. I had, Aquarius is a very astrological sign, so I have luck with astrology because Jupiter and Gemini, and Libra, I'm a poet, so Jupiter aspecting Libra has given me luck as a merchant, as a poet, and other things. So you have to kind of see how Jupiter is in your chart, how it's aspecting, where, what sign it's in, what industries it's going to bring luck to, and if there, like everything in Vedic astrology, there are 1,000 shades of gray, right? We get blacks and whites. Now, in my case, if Jupiter is with Saturn, sometimes you'll get a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. Some people were born with that in Virgo in the 80s. Saturn's uplifted by the Jupiter conjunction, but Jupiter is brought down. So, it could be that you always have to look at what afflictions are happening to Jupiter. If it's weak in the Navamsha, if it's got malefic aspects to it, it's a problem. Ketu takes a little bit away from Jupiter here, but it's not a direct aspect here. Okay. So Jupiter can be a source of luck in your chart. You can always see where Jupiter is in your chart, and that's a source of wealth. Okay, Arudalagna. I'll start this a little bit. Maybe I'll talk a little bit how you calculate it, because you all have to start studying it if you don't know it. So planets influencing the 11th from the Arudalagna are also important for understanding the sources of wealth. And let me explain what Arudas are again. I'm sorry, I didn't finish my Jupiter section. So the Arudas section, that slide's out of place. So we'll come back to Arudas in a minute. The success and failure. So Jupiter brings luck and Saturn brings failure, right? So we always have to see how Jupiter and Saturn are functioning in our chart. So one of the things that you can always look at is the 10th from Jupiter will show the fruits of profession. The 10th from Jupiter will show the fruits of profession. So that technique is not taught very much, but in my case, the 10th from Jupiter, I've got Sun in Pisces. I also have Lord of the 10th and the 5th. So when I was first, that people would say 10th, Leo again is a sign connected to stockbrokers and investments and things like that. But it's in the sign, it's in the 5th house, the Lord of speculation. So I actually did become a professional investor and developed a company based on that, Lord of the 10th and the 5th. But also just the fact that the sign 10th from Jupiter is showing, good luck for me. And so Pisces, the other thing that you may not know me, I've been a meditation teacher since 1976. I've been a yoga teacher. I teach astrology. I've been teaching spiritual wisdom. I don't earn very much money from any of those things, but it is a passion. But it's very supported because it's Pisces. Pisces is very connected to spiritual teaching. I have the A9 in there, which is the Aruda of spiritual teaching. Aruda means it's the manifestation of ninth house of higher education, of gurus, of spiritual teachings, of and I have the sun there, which is Lord of the 10th. So all of this is kind of blessing my career. 10th from Jupiter, Lord of the 10th and the 5th. Jupiter, Sun conjunct the A9, Pisces being a sign of colored by spiritual teaching, counseling, and being a Vedic astrologer, is a very Pisces profession, especially when I do spiritual teaching. So look at the 10th from Jupiter for fruits of profession. 10th from Saturn will show the failures and obstacles. So you don't want to pursue signs of the zodiac that are connected to 10th from Saturn. Now, 10th from Saturn for me is the sign of Cancer. And I'm not sure how that's manifested in my life. I certainly have not liked trying to think if I've ever failed at cancer-oriented things. I worked for my dad at his food store, and I come from a family of grocers. Both my grandparents and my father were grocers. But I think with Saturn being in the moon owning the Cancer owning the 10th from there, it was not something I was destined to follow in. And I think when I was one time I had to work full time for my dad. And my dad was not happy with what I did with the business at that time. So anyway, it was kind of interesting, but I never thought about that. But this would also suggest that I wouldn't be good opening up a restaurant or opening up a hotel, because Cancer owns all of those. And so 10th from Saturn is not going to be supportive. So let's choose a profession, 10th from Jupiter, to support success. Now, benefics in the 11th promote success. Malefics in the 11th give success, but they may do so through malefic means. So Saturn in the 11th, which is actually a difficult placement because it aspects the first, means that you'll work hard. You have to work hard for your money. And it'll wear you out health-wise, because we said the 11th house is 6 from the 6th, so it's a health house, and Saturn aspects the first house. So Saturn in the 11th is a difficult placement. You have to work hard for your money, and it'll wear out your health. Mars in the 11th will require a lot of will and pressure. You get Mars in the 11th with people, yeah, they'll be very successful, but they're so pushy that you want to punch them, because they just kind of drive you to death, if you have a boss like that. If you have a retrograde planet in the 11th, it shows unfulfilled desires from past lives, and it blocks success. So you don't want retrograde, particularly retrograde malefics in the 11th. Particularly, probably the worst thing you can have is a retrograde Saturn in the 11th house, because it blocks success and fulfillment of desires, and it creates a lot of suffering because of the aspect on the first. Mars and Ketu in the 11th make one hot-headed and impatient. Can't get there quick enough. Saturn or Rahu, they create anxiety and worry and paranoia. So again, you can get success. You'd rather have benefics in the 11th, but you can get malefics will give success in the 11th, but not without the subjective problems. Now the 11th Lord Um, 11th Lord and completion of tasks. So the 11th Lord, so there's a difference. Sometimes we always talk about planets in the 11th house. They're always good, but the 11th house Lord, where it's placed, may be difficult because it creates health problems. The 11th house is like the 6th Lord. So if you put the 11th house in the 6th, it's a double whammy for health. But if you put the Sun in the 11th, it shows the ability to plan and manage and will bring success. Mars in the 11th shows the ability to execute. Ketu in the 11th shows intuitive power, intuition, and you can manifest your desires to the level of cities. Ketu has that magical power. If you're ruled by Ketu, sometimes you can think and grow rich, and particularly Ketu in the 11th. So that's particularly strong placement as a city for manifesting your desire. So Ketu in the 11th is golden. Jupiter in the 11th can judge well and choose priorities. Venus in the 11th gives the ability to manage people and priorities. Again, Venus is good with people in relationship, right? Saturn in the 11th, hard work, it's going to hurt health. Rahu in the 11th, you're going to cheat and scheme your ways to success. You know, Rahu's a crook, right? You know, the whole story of Rahu snuck his way to become the immortal god and drank the elixir, but, you know, got cut in half into Rahu and Ketu by Vishnu's disc. But Rahu was a schemer. He is a crook. And the archetype of Rahu is always unethical and always is cheating. You have to be careful when you have Rahu in the 11th to be ethical. And, you know, people with Rahu problems don't see them because Rahu by nature is just by hook or by crook, they're going to get what they want. You know, they're very ambitious. And if you don't see Rahu's blind ambition and lack of ethics, then it causes problems. Moon in the 11th gives you the ability to inspire people, very good placement. Mercury in the 11th gives the ability to get friends to help complete your work. So those are some more details about planets in the 11th. Okay, we talked about this already. Okay, so quick question. I'll take another quick break here. I'll unmute you all if you have questions. So you're all unmuted. Turn your orange mics green and ask a question. I had a question from, let's see if there's something in the chat box here. Nothing in the chat box. Yeah.
Yeah. So do you consider like Bhav Chalit or you consider the original Rashi Chakra?
Okay. I have learned in my older age, I use the Rashi Chalit. The Bhava Chalit is about Maya. When we have a planet if a planet is, let's say, in the 11th house in the Rashi chart, and it moves into the 10th house in the Bhava Chalit chart, then there may be some illusion in the mind about career or something like that. So I have a lesson on this in my foundation class, but people don't teach this enough. The Bhava Chalit chart is actually about Maya, but Maya is very real. Sometimes in the Bhava Chalit chart, we think we can do something, but it doesn't manifest because it's not in the Rashi chart, and that causes a problem. So we need to use the Bhava Chalit chart to see our Maya. I should have put a chapter in this in my blind spots book, but it is, the Bhava Chalit chart really creates blind spots because we don't really see reality. We have more dreams of Maya in the Bhava Chalit charts. So when you have a planet, when the planets move from the Rashi chart in the Bhava Chalit chart, then we should analyze them for Maya and illusion in the mind, whereas we need to analyze the Rashi chart for what's really going to manifest in the world. And what's really going to manifest in the world is really in the Aruda charts, but that's a whole advanced topic.
Yeah. In continuation to that, since you're using like the Gemini, so even the aspects should be Gemini when considering the 11th house, like which planets are aspecting the 11th house, the Rashi aspects, not the.
Yeah, one thing that I've learned is I try not to mix Gemini and Parashari. You kind of use each of them separately to try to get the same results. So I think the Gemini aspects are more important because they're kind of anchor things that are part of your genetic existence. Whereas the Parashara aspects, change in transit, and when they reoccur in transit, I think they happen more powerfully. So if you have a Jupiter trine in your chart, when it repeats in transit, then it kicks in. That's how I look at it.
So one last question. So there are these exceptions in Aruda Lagna, right? So if it is in the fourth or in the 7th house, do you use the exceptions? And also yes. One more question is the dasha, the Chara dasha that you mentioned. Do you use the Parashara Chara dasha or the K and Rao Chara dasha? Because in Jagannath Pura you have both the
Right. I use the K and Rao Chara Dasha. K and Rao spent 50 years with Chara Dasha, and I just taught an advanced class on dashas, and we spent 6 or 7 weeks on Chara Dasha, and we use the K and Rao configurations, and it's very easy to predict from it. I mean, the amazing thing about Chara Dasha, it's just so easy to predict from.
Okay, and also use the exception, right?
I use the exceptions, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Hello.
Yeah. Question.
Hi, Barry. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Is this Arvind?
Yeah. Yes. Hi, Barry.
Good to meet
Yeah. So I had a doubt. So when you're looking at 11th from the Arudha Lagna, how much of that do you also look at in the Navamsha for seeing sources of income?
Good question. I don't usually use the. You definitely can use Arudas in the Varga charts. I have not taught that in my classes yet, and I don't use it as much. When I don't have an answer for you on that. I have read a couple articles where people have had a lot of success doing that, but I haven't personally used it myself.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Siddharth, did you have a question? You've got your mic on.
Sorry, no question, Barry.
Okay, so I'm going to mute you all again, so keep your vacuum cleaners and blenders off. I really had that happen many times. Like the wife puts on a blender in the background and it just bleeds into the videotape, so that's good. Okay, so let's review all houses regarding money, because money is in all house. Money is energy. It's not just physical money, and money is in all the houses of. We go over this in part 1. In more detail, but I just wanted to bring it in here because some of you haven't had part 1. So first house connected to fame, status, prosperity, livelihood, proficiency. Second house, savings. Now, when people always talk about second house as a money house, it is, but it's your ability to hold on to money. It's, are you a good saver? And income is the 11th house. It's really the 11th from the Arudha Lagna. But family money is the second house, acquisition, holding on to money, storing grains. In ancient times, if you had big grain elevators, that was wealth, that was second house. My farmers all have big grain elevators, and their wealth is their farm, is their grain. So that's all second house. Third house is courage, the ability to be an entrepreneur. If you have benefics in the third house, you have more energy to be in business for yourself. Fourth house is property, vehicles, comforts, agriculture, real estate. So that's an aspect of wealth, but specifically, we have a whole lesson on property in part 1. Fifth house is speculation, investment, children as wealth. Sixth house is debt and theft. So you have to watch out for a lot of malefics in the sixth house or problems with the sixth house, because you may have problems with debting. And our bankers have made that very easy for us these days. Seventh house, business partners, commercial activities, diplomacy. It's also a very important business house because it's 7th is 10th from the 10th. And it's also 4th from the 4th. So it's a place of professional happiness. So if you're going to be happy in business, you have to look at the 7th house. You want, Jupiter in the 7th. Is, or Venus in the 7th, they're not good for certain things. So you generally don't want any planet in the 7th, but at least, if you put Jupiter or Venus in the 7th, it may be good for business happiness. 8th house is inheritance, money from insurance or lotteries, loss of debts, money from alimony, money from partnerships. So we have a whole lesson on that in part 1. 9th house, luck, wealth, your general wealth indicators. 9th house, it's wealth from past lives that you've inherited from your father. And 9th house wealth is, is like Jupiter. It's you want a strong 9th house in your chart because it will save the chart. 10th house, again, status, power, profession, things like that. Now, 6th house is everyday work. If you have a job and you go to work, 10th house is more like profession, where sometimes you have your own business, you have status at being in business, you're a manager at a company. That's really status. There's a difference between everyday work and the dullness of the 6th house and going to work every day versus the 10th house, which is profession. 11th house is all gains, nature of income. I wouldn't say, again, we said income is really from the Aruda Lagna, fulfillment of desires. 12th house, investment expenditures for business expansion, losses, repayment of debt, and living abroad. So all the houses have money in them. So it's not just the 2nd house and the 11th house. You know, the 9th house is important for many. The 5th house is important for many. The 11th house is do we earn money from career? You know, 11th from the Aruda Lagna. So very important. So the problem is, you know, sometimes you get the trick houses involved, the 6th, 8th, and the 12th houses. And there are these things, you know, for those of you who know a lot of Vedic astrology, you have these what are called Vipreet Raj Yogas, Lord of the 6th and the 8th, Lord of the 8th and the 6th, Lord of the 6th and the 12th, Lord of the 8th and the 12th. And the Vedic texts say that these are combinations are good. And when in reality, when you do people's charts, it's like, yeah, you can get gains for money, but it happens through suffering. So like Lord of the 6th and the 8th, you know, maybe you get insurance money because you had an accident, you know. You get these combinations with these Vipreet Raj Yogas, and the Vedic, you know, if you just read Parashara and he says, oh, these are good, you know, and I have teachers that have told me, oh, these are good. But when you talk to people that have Vipreet Raj Yogas, yeah, they were out of work for 2 years and they were in bed the whole time, but their insurance paid for the whole thing, you know, is that good? I don't know. I mean, I guess it's good because the money came, but you know, I'd rather not have a Vipreet Raj Yoga. So if you have a Parivartana Yoga, you'd like to have it between the 11th house and the 1st, 2nd, 4th, 7th, 10th, or 5th or 9th houses. So those are always golden, and those are always good for gain. So those create all these Raj Yogas whenever you have those kind of, not Raj Yogas, you get these Parivartana Yogas. Good money situations come from exchanges of houses with the Lord of the 11th. You could be in the so the thing about Vedic astrology is there are many ways that things can manifest. And for those of you who know, if you have a planet in the nakshatra of the Lord of the 11th house, that could bring gains also. So you always have to look at what houses, what planets are connected to the nakshatra Lord and where they're placed. So, you know, as we know, Vedic astrology is kind of infinitely complicated. So again, we went through this already. I don't know if I need to go through it again. But no, this is kind of interesting when you're looking at the 11th house to see if you'll be able to fulfill your desires. What is the sign Lord and where is the Lord placed? So what does the sign say about your source of income? So ideally, look at my chart. So sometimes you can look at the, so my Aruda Lagna is Virgo here, in the Can-Rao system, and I'm still kind of grappling with that, but the 11th for my Aruda Lagna is going to be Cancer. So it suggests that the source of my income should come from the moon. Now, it's interesting that even though I told you my family comes from I have a family ancestral line of grocers in my family, And I actually went into commodities, and I was, when I went into the speculative industry, I was actually very interested in pricing wheat and corn, and I actually do livestock also for the farmers, and that's actually a huge part of my business. And even the 11, I actually have a huge amount of income that comes from farmers, which is Virgo. So that's kind of, to me, that's kind of interesting. And I also have my A2 there, but but even Cancer is connected to food and commodities, so it's kind of interesting that that is connected here. Now, when you're looking at the 11th house, you want to compare it to other houses. Is the 11th house strong, but the second house weak? That means you can earn a lot but not save. And again, we might even think at the 11th from the root of log. I mean, I have to reduce some of this material because I'm doing more Gemini lately and doing more stuff with the Arudas. But even if we're doing regular Rashi analysis, if the 11th house is strong but the second house is weak, then you can earn a lot but not save. Now that's true in my chart. My wife's a good saver. I have a terrible chart for saving. Why is that? I've got Rahu in the second, and it's pretty weak in Sagittarius. And Rahu can't hold on to money. It either spends it or gambles it away, which I don't do anymore, or it just kind of goes up and down a lot. So my ability to save is very weak because I have Rahu in the second. My ability to earn is stronger because I have Mercury, the Lord of the 11th, in a Kendra aspected by Jupiter. I've always had really good income. The 11th of my root of Lagna is the moon, and the moon is in the first house, which is also very kind of a golden situation, even though it's fallen here, but it still produces. I've always had good luck with income because Mercury is strong. If the 11th house is strong, but the 9th house is weak, material gains come, but no wisdom accumulates karma from future Bethel. So, you have a weak 9th house. I have a strong 9th house, or the 9th and the 1st. You may not realize that you're creating bad karma from the business. I mean, there are people that we have a lot of industries in the world that have no ethical understanding. They pollute, they create toxic products and they don't care if people get sick. Think of the history of the tobacco industry. If you have a weak 9th house, and the presidents of those companies would have to have weak 9th houses. They don't have any social awareness that they're creating bad karma. So you want a strong 9th house to ethically make sure that whatever you do in business is going to benefit people, and it's not going to create bad karma for the future. If your 11th house is weak but the second house is strong, then you tend to save well, and you'll have money for old age. Now there are people. You meet people like this, they may not make a lot, but they save every penny. And when they retire, they have this huge account. I mean, my stepmother was like that. She worked as a seamstress for Goldman Sachs, Fifth Avenue, a department store in downtown Chicago. And she saved every penny. She never bought anything. She lived very frugally. And when she died and my dad was still alive, he inherited over $1 million from her because she just saved and invested every penny. And so that's a case where she didn't make a lot of money as a seamstress, but her second house was so strong that she just held on to everything. So I always teach people in the basic course, in part 1, savings is everything. You've got to take 10% or 20% of what you earn, no matter, even if you don't think you have enough, you always have to save it because you need it. At some point you need it. COVID has hit. People who had savings are doing a whole lot better than people who don't have savings. Saving is everything. The second house is everything. If you don't save, you're in trouble. If your 11th house is weak and your 5th house is strong, the chances you'll gamble yourself into debt. So sometimes people have 5th house, I said, investment and gambling are two sides of the same coin, really. And that you get people that just have to play. They have to go to Las Vegas. They have to, play the stock market, and they don't really know what they're doing. And here's a case where 11th house is weak and 5th house is strong. If the 11th house is strong, but the 5th house is weak, then you have to avoid risky investments. You know, so, and if the 12th house is stronger than the 11th house, it means that expenditures will be more than income. And I have that problem. And I, you know, you think I would have mastered it by now. I have an exalted Saturn in my 12th house, and anything in the 12th house is kind of unconscious. I was making really big money in my investment company for many years, but I was spending it. I bought lavish houses. I was traveling around the world with my guru, and you know, and I didn't really save it. And then the housing crisis quit. You know, business cycles change, and you know, I didn't have savings. I had spent all this money and had a great time with it. But so you don't want your 12th house. Your 12th house is strong. It can be unconscious about expenditures, and you have to be careful. And you have to just automatically make your employer take money out of your paycheck and pretend you don't have it. Very important rule. Okay. You know, here's I'm going to end in a few minutes too, because I don't want to go. You can only handle so much Jyotish, but I'll take questions in a minute. So 11 from the Aruda Lagna is very important. You have to know how to calculate your Aruda Lagna. Jagannatha Hora may do it for you. Many of you know enough astrology to do it. We'll learn how to do it on the tapes that I'm going to send to people. But 11 sun, if you have the sun 11 from the Aruda Lagna, then you'll have gains from father. Moon 11 from the Aruda Lagna, gains from mother. Mars, you know, gains from the Aruda Lagna, gains from brothers. But it could be all the things that we saw connected to Mars. Technology, I mean, machinery, industry is Mars. Engineering is Mars. So, you know, 11 from the Aruda Lagna for Mercury is uncles and relatives, but it's also Mercury things, right? Books, publishing, communication, blogging, writing, communication, libraries, you know, all those kind of things. So you have to kind of extrapolate this. If you're looking at Jupiter 11 from the Aruda Lagna, you'll make money from priests, counselors, or advisors. Well, yes, but also Jupiter related things, maybe law, maybe from philanthropy or something. You know, you have to extrapolate all of these. But sometimes, you know, if you do these basic Jyotish texts from ancient times, you know, everything was about family, you know, mother, father, uncle, sister, brother, you know, wife, you know, it's still like that. But in the real world, you know, it's much bigger. So you have to extrapolate the karkas. Rahu in the 11th house, money from 11 from the Aruda Lagna, money from foreigners, money from imports, you know. Ketu in the 11th from Aruda Lagna, money from exports. That one logically I never remember, but that's what the texts say. Okay, so I'm going to take a pause here. I don't want to go into this whole Aruda stuff because it gets very complicated. We will do it in the first live week of the class. This was our first lesson. We needed to have this lesson. So if you're taking the class, or if you're thinking of taking the course, you've done the first lesson, you needed this material, I will send you the PowerPoint with enrollment. And for those of you who have enrolled in the class, we'll continue looking at the Aruda Lagna and Arudas and their importance in finance on September 12th. So I'm going to open up the class to questions again. So I've unmuted your mics, so you can ask questions. I'm going to put my contact information up again. So questions about anything?
Hi, Barry. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was talking earlier about Navamsha, right? So what I was really trying to ask was, if, for example, the 5th house is weak in the Rasi chart, but if it's strong in the Navamsha, can that mean someone can enter the stock market later in their life or something like that?
You know, Vargas have their own language, and I don't always think there's a one-on-one correlation between every house in the Rashi chart and every house in the Navamsha chart. I would never look at it that way. They have specific meanings. So I wouldn't look at the fifth house in the Navamsha chart. You know, there is a chart, there's a Varga for investments, the D5, which is actually meant for spiritual. It's actually meant for deciding what spiritual gods you should worship, but it is the Varga of the fifth house. So you could maybe extrapolate looking at the D5. You know, that's a possibility. And I haven't even experimented with that, but in theory it should work.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Thank you.
Other questions? Afi, could you get on and maybe share your experience with my classes?
Yes, of course. Hi, Barry. The experiences, I've been taking classes from Barry for 2 years or longer than 2 years, maybe 2.5. And he's an excellent teacher. He's extremely informative. And what I've noticed about Barry that's different from a lot of other teachers is that he really cares about his students. He's very thoughtful about his responses, and there's a lot of interactive interactions with his students. He's always very responsive. For example, if you send him an email or you ask him a question outside the class, he quickly responds. And another difference that I've noticed that Barry possesses is that he's not very egotistic. A lot of people are very egotistic and like, my time is more important than your time. He's not like that at all. He really cares about his students. I've learned so much from his classes to a point that I've started doing charts of friends and colleagues, and they're highly impressed. And most of my knowledge comes from classes that I've taken with Barry. So I highly recommend his classes.
Okay, thank you, Afi. Yeah, it's certainly hard to toot your own horn. I'm actually very humble and modest. Actually, if you look at,
I can also add something else, Barry, if you want. I'm taking
Yes,
classes
please.
with you before.
Yeah.
I have taken classes with different teachers, but I love Barry because he has so much knowledge about different topics, and he will always answer your questions. I love his blog. His blog is amazing if you want to know a little bit more. Barry will always reply to your emails, trying to teach you, share what he knows. So, and I really find his classes very affordable for the price and all the things that you'll learn. So I really recommend, highly recommend Barry's class.
Thank you, Diana. I hope this recorded. I didn't see the record button go on. We'll see what happens when it's over. It is being recorded. Okay. So any other questions? So our next live class, for those of you who would like to continue studying with me, is this class is going to be on Saturdays, even though the first class here was on Sunday. It's going to be on Saturdays at 12, and that will help people in India too, if maybe if they can take the class live. I can also even move it up a little bit if I get a lot of people from India that want to take the class. The course fee for part 2 is $325. If you need some support in making payments or a payment plan, or if you need some additional support, you can let me know. Part 1 is on sale for $197. It's on my website. Again, there's 9 really great tapes there. And a lot of that material is very core. And even if you're taking part 2 and you haven't taken part 1, if you can sneak in and grab part 1, I think you can find enough time to get through part 1. And you don't have to, but it certainly be, I think it may give you what you need to. I do financial consultations for people. If you look on my website, I'm getting pretty booked up. I'm actually I don't even wonder if I'm going to stop consultations because the market's getting crazy and they're demanding a lot more time from me. I've got We've got investment letters on my website at commoditytimers.com. Let me write that out for you. I actually just started a new letter called the Top Commodity Timers. I have a new website called a new product called the Top Tech Stocks, and basically, you know, talking about Tesla and Apple and Google and Amazon and all the popular ones, PayPal and NIO and all the big stocks that everybody follows every day, the only ones that are making money. So I have a new newsletter on that, and I have commodity letters that time gold every day, twice a day, and things like that. So if you don't want to study financial astrology, you can also get my wisdom through my newsletters that are available. And again, I do love, I teach these classes out of love. It's my deepest dharma, you know, that Jupiter K2 conjunction in the 8th house. In my Jaime charts, you know, that comes up, very, very strongly in the 1st house, I think. So my life purpose is very much teaching Vedic astrology, and I luckily, because I make money from other things, I don't have to charge $1,600 for a course or something like some of my colleagues do. So I'm happy to just share this wisdom with you if you're interested. Other questions?
Barry, I have a question out of the blue. When you record classes, do you have to press the record button, or can you set up Zoom to record your classes automatically? And I'm asking you this because I start using Zoom for my students.
Right. If you use Zoom, you do have to press the record button. I have GoToWebinar set up so that as soon as the class starts, it hits the record button, and I don't have to remember to press the button.
That's what I thought I did, so, but I want to make sure because you were not sure if you have to press the record button.
Yeah. Yesterday, I had a class on medical astrology, and the cloud converter wasn't working, so I had it downloaded the videotape to my computer, and I had to upload it again. But I think it's working today, so I was worried about that. I forgot to look. So.
I have another question that you said about Rahu, because I also have Rahu in the 2nd house, but in Aquarius, in his own Shatabishak, which is his own nakshatra. And I'm actually really good at saving. My problem is that I have had times that money has been very difficult for me to make. And actually my savings is what has saved me. But I'm also Capricorn ascendant. Does that issue of always saving money is more related to Rahu in Shatabishak or Capricorn ascendant?
Capricorn's good at saving money anyway, because they're just good at that. But as something like I said, I have Rahu in Sag, which doesn't have any dignity, and so I have problems. Yes. Rahu inside of Bisak in its own nakshatra, in its own sign of Aquarius, is going to do better, but you still have to be kind of, you haven't hit. Have you gone through a Rahu period or a Rahu sub period?
No, I mean Jupiter period, but yeah, my Rahu period, I had times that my job was very stable and I have money easily come to me, and then I have periods that I have totally broke.
Yeah, and like I said, when we look at Chara Dasha and we look how the chart rotates in our dashas, we all go through these periods. We have lots of money, and then the chart rotates and the planets shift to other houses, and suddenly we have to read the chart in a different way, and money in that dasha is not good, and we know we're going into a Saturn period. I've got Saturn in the 12th. I better save all my money in Jupiter period, because when Saturn in the 12th hits for my Saturn period, it's like, forget it, right? So you
say that in Saturn things can change even though it's my ruler?
I was talking about my chart, but Saturn's gold for you because it's your first chart, Lord.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay, final Jeopardy answer, anybody? Okay. So what'll happen is you'll get a copy of this tape if you want to view it again. Go to webinar, we'll send it out within 4 hours now. Automatically, you'll get an email. Sometimes the email goes to your spam filter. So if you're looking for a tape, if you want to share the tape with somebody, who wasn't here, you can do that. People who missed the class live will just get a copy of the tape also. And again, you can email me at barry2@appliedvedicastrology.com or visit my website at appliedvedicastrology.com to sign up for any classes. And you can also ask questions there. Anyway, great being with you today. I forget how much fun I have with this topic. I've been doing it for so long, but it's very funny because I'll just tell you one last story. I got stereotyped as the financial astrologer. So when I got invited to the Vedic astrology conferences, it was always to speak about financial astrology. And so I deliberately, the last 6 or 7 years, tried to distance myself from financial astrology so that I would be a spiritual astrologer. And so now, when I go to the conferences, I gave a talk on moksha last year at the Sedona Vedic Astrology Conference, so I got to do all the things that I like to do, but people still want me to do financial astrology. So next year at the Sedona Vedic Astrology Conference, I'm giving a class on.
Oh, I've been waiting for this class for so long because I took the financial class #1 with you, and I was like, I've been waiting forever for the #2. So I was so excited when I saw that you finally are going to do it, because I also want to analyze my D2. The D2 is so different. So yeah.
Yeah, that's right. We are going. I am keeping a lesson on the Hora. On the D2, and there are a lot of the D2 gets miscalculated and misinterpreted. There's 3 ways to calculate the D2. I think I do have that lesson scheduled, and I keep changing the curriculum finale, but we'll look at it. I will do that for you, Deanna.
Barry, I have one question that I thought that I just thought about regarding remedies that initially at the beginning of the class that you were talking about, remedies that potentially could alleviate some of the afflictions to the 11th house, the 11th Lord, 11th from Aruda Lagna. What if all of those are in fixed signs? In other words, the affliction, to the house, to that 11th house is a fixed sign. And whatever remedies that you have done, and I really understand about victim mentality, and some people have a lot more victim mentality than others, but whatever you have done, it's as far as remedies, tithing, and everything has not worked. Is there anything else that can be done to remedy, or would you tell someone that, you're this is your karma, you got to let it burn out?
I'm kind of, I call myself a blaster, and I feel like, that we can't, but I'm Scorpio, so it's 8th house. But I feel like we can transform any issue in our life. Some people aren't like that, like you say. And you're right, if you feel stuck and if you feel like a victim, you won't do the remedies. I mean, I've seen people happen, and if your mind is weak. But if you really want to change your life, you have to inspire to really change your life, and then you almost have to be a coach for them to kind of really push them to make those changes. But if they don't want to do it, then they're stuck. I ultimately, lesson 8 and 9, I think in part 1, are all about remedies, and I have a lot more financial remedies that I could even talk about today. But most of the part 1 class is about, probably half of it is about remedies. But I do feel there's a remedy for everything, and we shouldn't feel stuck. But people also have to have the willpower to change. And sometimes you have to give them a remedy for their willpower.
Yeah, and it was very interesting. One of the remedies that you talked about, positive, talking to yourself in front of the mirror. If you recall, I think it was in the 80s and 90s, Al Franken, who was in SNL, he would do, the skits where he would sit in front of the mirror.
Oh, I forgot that.
Wow. Good enough. I'm beautiful enough. I'm smart enough. Do you remember that?
No, it's vaguely coming back now. That's great. Yeah, that Canfield technique's been around for a while, but it's important. You have to If you can't do that, then you're sabotaging yourself. You know, I am worthy. You know, I am great. You are all great. You're divine. The divine wants you to be great. He doesn't want you to suffer in poverty. Okay.
Thank
Okay.
you.
So on that note, we will see many of you in 3 weeks on Saturday, September 12th at noon. I will notify you if there's a time change. Once in a while I get, like, 10 people from India who say, can you make it a little earlier so I can go to bed? But let me see. Okay, I just got some messages here. Okay, great. Ravi Kumar, did you have and maybe you're gone. I think you had a question, but I think we're good. Okay, so we will see you soon next week. I'm off for the first time in a long time. No classes next week. Yay. So I get a break. Anyway, take care, guys. Have a great Sunday. Bye-bye.
Bye, Barry. Bye-bye.